I don't know if you guys know, but that's where SpaceX was originally, and it's a big aerospace hardware industrial hub.
So we had to change venues because of the San Francisco, what are they called? Blue Angels, right? Avengers. The San Francisco Avengers is the code word. So thank you for coming all the way to LA just for this podcast. This is the only reason you're in LA right now. I'm totally lying. This is not the only reason, but I'm happy timing worked out. So yeah, let's. What have you been up to since we last talked?
Matei, I probably wouldn't have come if you didn't invite me. But I did have to launch something, which I was getting to after that. That also worked out. What brought me out to LA was El Segundo. Mm-hmm. I had never been. I've been to LA 4 times. And I don't know if you guys know, but that's where SpaceX was originally. And it's a big aerospace hardware industrial hub. And I'd never really, met the startups there or hosted an event ever. So I wanted to see what the energy is like. I was here last week and I got to check out Varda Space, which is doing manufacturing in space. I think we got to talk a little bit about it off camera. And there's some other companies in there too. There's Outpost Space that wants to build transportation systems to and back from space, and as like payload is going to increase. I got to check out Radiant Nuclear, which is building nuclear microreactors with the end mission being energy for Mars and other planets. Moon is the first destination, though. I think we talked about it. So I wanted to check out all these companies. I'm like friends with some of these founders or their investors, and see the energy for myself. I've checked out the Austin energy. I wanted to check out the OG El Segundo energy, and it's a thing. The people, El Segundo is like this different pocket in California. It's primarily red. People are very religious. I found that out very recently.
But that's like 45 minutes away from here, right?
Yes, it's like 50 minutes down south from where we are right now.
I was actually talking to Julia earlier about El Segundo, and she lives in London and she wants to move to El Segundo with her kids. And I'm like, I never heard about El Segundo as a community where tech people want to move. I know they're doing a shit ton of stuff in space, but and I actually never saw how the city looks like. So I'm like Googling it, and she's like, no, it doesn't look good. Then what is it? It's the energy.
It's the culture.
Yeah. So that's interesting because we just had that conversation, and but I wanted to ask you, like, how do you actually go and visit these companies? I mean, you must.
I mean, I know some of the founders, right?
Yeah.
That's how I got, or like I know their investors. That's how I got to visit them, and
definitely. Otherwise, I think all the space freaks would just show up like, hey.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, I think like obviously being in the industry for quite a bit now, I do know people, and that's what allowed me to visit. But it was my first time visiting many of these companies. I'd met them, the founders, in other places, DC, Austin. We have some mutuals. But it was my first time actually checking out the companies. And I think I touched upon me growing up in the military, right? Mm-hmm. So how my dad was a commander of a unit. In a unit, you typically have like 600 people. And you're running basically a mini business. Many people don't know this, but like if an officer is operating a unit, they're responsible for the P&L of all the expenses of the unit. So your investor is basically Army, Central Command, and you have to actually make money as well. So you have smaller businesses within the unit. So you're almost an entrepreneur. You're supposed to run canteens or cafes, restaurants, outsource them, allow civilians in, transportation services, any unique advantage your unit has, you're supposed to make money, not just take from the Central Command and Army. Which is very interesting, right? So imagine like my dad is running the 600 people company, and I, as like this 6-year-old kid, that's where I go, right? After school, I'm like, oh, where's dad? Like, I want to go play some sports, right? go up to the unit, and he obviously has no time for me. He's coming. It's like literally like running a company. He's coming home, going at 7 a.m., coming home at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., right? So that's the only time we can spend time together. And he's like, okay, like younger officers, soldiers, you can look after, entertain this kid, right? And I naturally end up going to the hangars where the military vehicles are, and
That's why I
the
wanted to
smell
ask
of
you, but there are some perks in going to a military base.
Oh,
you
yeah,
play with
100%.
all the kid toys, like
100%,
the tanks,
yeah.
the trucks.
Yeah.
You look at the guns
so
and stuff.
the trucks, the guns, it's basically the smell of oil, right? I'm used to that, right? So there's something about feeling like home in the industry. And the event was themed Future of Industry, and I came back to industrial warehouses after a while, right? I live in the Bay. There's a lot more software companies up there. And when I came, it felt at home. I naturally felt this energy, just like the smell of it. Just looking at big equipment, I was like, this feels right at home.
I get it, and but what happened to the Bay? I mean, they basically software companies just took over all the warehousing, right? And
Right.
now they.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they drink healthy water, and they have some kale stuff happening there, and no more screws and bolts.
I think that's a coastal thing that happens in all of California. That happens in most metropolitans, believe it or not. That happens in Austin. That happens in DC. That happens in New York City. I think that's more of a metropolitan thing. With metropolitans have become more blue, or let's not politicize it, but they've become more modern liberal, which is not really liberal, right? The definition of libertarians has changed, and maybe we're true libertarians at heart, but the definition is swayed politically, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but I think
I don't claim to know anything about it, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, but I think for a healthy lifestyle, you need both worlds working together, right?
A freedom of choice.
You need the manufacturing and you need the software. You need them to be in the same place.
Yeah. So I think, just to clarify, I'm not saying like it's a bad thing that there's
same.
I'm just saying like there's definitely a higher concentration of more hardcore, hardware engineering in this pocket. Yeah, and it's because of the defense primes. It's because of SpaceX and their alumni and companies that have been founded ever since. It's because of that more than anything.
Well, what was the? Because I think it's an interesting, because you mentioned the energy there, right?
Yeah.
So how was the energy different compared to like a software company, right? Because you mentioned the smell of oil and everything. A software company, especially one that's trending, can have a vibe when you go into their offices and you feel the energy, but you don't have anything physical, that you can see.
Right.
There's a ton of people at their laptops, essentially. So how would you compare a cool, vibey software company office compared to what you just saw?
So I think like pushing out products in either company that you're passionate about, that create an impact, that solve people's problems, is probably just as exhilarating for both companies, right? But again, like I'll bring up Bogdan because I was at their annual event last week, and they played this video of their first launch. So they sent this capsule up into space that did this experiment, came back, landed successfully, preserved the crystal they had, the polymorph they had. And Will, I interviewed him, he was joking that the hardest commute for the polymorph was the truck that they used to bring it back home. Right? It's just setting the temperature and everything, making sure they preserve it. When that video stopped playing, there are 60 employees or something in the backyard of this factory where they're doing both pharma research on formulation. They're also manufacturing the capsule. And in the back, where all the employees are, and at the end, there's this loud cheer that goes off. I don't hear those loud cheers on software product launches. This energy. So they were there with their kids. They were there with their dogs, pets, everyone. And the crowd erupted, like culturally aligned, people looking to,
But
work
I mean,
at the
we
frontier.
both watched the SpaceX launch, and I mean, they were cheering for multiple moments during the launch, when it started, when it separated, but especially the peak was when it actually landed and Mechazilla caught it. I think it's something in the fact that when you make a physical
There's
thing
something about the
and
physical
you
world.
see
Yeah.
it fly, like
Yeah.
you actually built it. You put in that rivet, that bolt, you installed that engine, and then it
100%.
actually flew, and then it came back,
Yeah.
and it didn't go kaboom.
Yeah.
It actually works. That transmits something because it's something created with your own hand, which I think you don't get that in software. You get the joy, right? When we launched the platform, and
Don't get us wrong, it's like a lot of hard work
yeah.
to push out anything software, whether it's like this podcast, right? It's a product in itself, whether it's any other like SaaS platforms or like marketplaces. All of these are a lot of hard work goes into it. But there's something, I guess, intrinsic about human nature that attracts us to physical products.
And I think it's interesting. That's why more and more software products are trying to give it some physicality, right? So podcasts are they do live recordings with an audience. So suddenly it feels more physical because you have some people there and they get to feel the energy of the room and they get to shake hands at the end. So, hey, I touched something, I touched a human being that was speaking to me. We were talking earlier at one of the events here. We were talking about kind of the future of AI, what will change, and what will stay the same was one question. Okay, things will change for sure, it's obvious, but what will not change significantly? And someone said that probably physical events will not change a lot. They might actually increase because imagine 20 years from now, you have AR glasses and everything is digital. You have AI doing everything for you. So you're going to probably want more kind of physical connection to the world. You're going to want to go outside and meet people. So it's interesting how software is trying to become hardware and hardware is kind of trying to, doing the hardware part obviously, but then going into software with everything. So yeah. Tell us a bit about, what was some cool things that you saw there that you didn't expect to see, right? Because, you went to El Segundo, you saw amazing things that you were kind of probably hoping to see, but what was something that was unexpected that you saw there? Like, okay, well, I was expected to be impressed, but this took the cherry,
So I was expecting to see these things, but like seeing them versus like watching a video of it is very different, right? The videos are out there, they've been covered, and it's just not the same. And that's why I think like colleges do these company tours, right? There's something about company tours. And if like delegations come from abroad, there's a lot of tech transfer. Countries bring delegations of entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley or different pockets of the US and take them to factories, companies, right? I guess there's something about just like physically being in a place and maybe thinking, oh, maybe I can do this. These people are just like me, right? Maybe there's something about that. You look at other people and they're seeing is believing. You're like, hey, it feels like I'm not too different and I can probably accomplish something which is very similar.
But I think there is a comeback of actually manufacturing physical things. We met these guys that were making flying cars. We met guys that are making vintage-looking electric cars. So that designed with no screens, but gauges, and they actually look insane. Great, there's a lot of people that have started space companies. Like Varda is very young, right? There's more space launches than ever happening all over the US. So people, I think there's physical things are starting to become sexy again. Up until a couple of years ago, it was all about software, AI, social networks, blah, blah, blah. And now you see SpaceX, and when Elon was saying, hey, I'm going to do this, everybody was like, fuck it, that's impossible. And now when you see a footage like that, yeah, that triggers something in you. And hey, maybe I can build a scooter that's electric, or maybe, the mono wheel, 5 years ago, there was no such thing. Now there's a ton of companies. So, and that's actually good because we're man and we like stuff and we get cool new toys. And come on.
Yeah. It's also an interesting intersection of hardware and software. I was thinking right now about like the whole story with the human AI thing and the rabbit, which is an intersection of hardware and software, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? Because some things are like heavy hardware, and others sit somewhere in the middle. So, do you think we're going to see an increase in, let's call it soft hardware? Let's call it something like soft hardware, like the humane pen, that will increase as well? Or are they still going to be separated, like serious hardware, rocket type of thing, and software, which is just software but doesn't have a physical presence?
So I am absolutely no expert on consumer products. So I couldn't tell you.
We aren't either, but it's an interesting conversation.
It's an interesting conversation. Look, obviously, there have been significant advances made in software, right? But like, as you mentioned, there seems to be this movement in hardware. And that's primarily because if you look back at the history of venture capital, it started with funding physicists and chemists who would go on to become these company CEOs, right? And the products fundamentally had technology moats, right? And now what is ending up happening is that software might lose its moat because software is becoming a commodity increasingly. And with advances in AI, if you look 10 years out, who's to say it's not going to become a commodity? You have companies like Replit with, their auto coding agents, right? That code for you. They're coding apps. You can code an app in Replit in natural language now. And the quality of those apps you're able to code with natural language is obviously naturally going to increase, right? So apply the Moore's law to everything you see in a very crappy form today, right? And 10 years from now, it's not going to look the same. We know this. So knowing that venture funding cycles are 10 years, knowing that if you're looking at software, you really have to think deeply about what industry is software still going to impact, right?
So that's an interesting point because I'm actually on the same page with you. I don't know whom we talked about this topic, that now in 5 years from now, everybody can just go play with an app and they actually get a piece of software. So basically, this is the most interesting part of the secrets of Silicon Valley, because we keep asking everybody, what do you think, what's next? AI is cool now. Video was cool, 7 years ago. What's next? So, I think that the fact that moving interest into hardware and physical things from software, that's probably the best answer we've got so far.
So I'd like to add to that. I don't think it's just hardware. It's about discovering new technology modes. So these advances in software are going to unlock an array of new opportunities, but at the intersection of different industries. Just to, I guess, touch back to your point on how software, enabling hardware, 100% it is, right? These advances in software are helping us make way more advanced products. The reason you see way more functional humanoids now is because of advances in software, right? Sure, yes, the cost of hardware has also gone down, and there have been some advances in many different technologies in the last probably 5 years that are helping us produce. There are about 20 different companies that are making usable humanoids, right? Unitary, which is I think Chinese company, they're selling one for $67K now. You can buy it off. I don't know how usable it is, but
right, but it's a product.
It's a product out there in the market right away. And humanoids I actually do believe it's going to be $1 trillion opportunity.
Really? So you think we're gonna have AI butlers, essentially, physical AI butlers?
I wrote a small angel check in this company, Figure AI. I don't know if you've heard about them. No, okay. So they have raised about $750 million. from
That's a
OpenAI,
bit.
Microsoft, Bezos, Nvidia, like everyone in the industry, etc., etc. They got when I met Brett, he was building in stealth. Within a year, with like 20 or 30 engineers, he got the robot walking. After the first like 70 million round, this guy operates at like insane speed. After the first round, which was a 70 million Series A, they got the robot. You first basically get the legs to walk, right? Then they got the whole upper body. They got like this figure of one. The videos like on their YouTube. It's like functional, like the whole robot with its torso and everything is like walking around. And then they like made it useful. After the partnership with OpenAI, you can check out the video. They show it like picking up apples, on a sink and putting it into a basket and doing some, dishwashing, and all through natural language communication. Right? That's possible through LLMs and the advances in AI. Hopefully that like helps answer. I know this is like more robotics centric, but like the same advances are happening in our physical infrastructure across construction, across biomanufacturing, across advanced materials. How like it's because like we're limited by compute, right? If we can come up with, let's say, 1 million different formulations of possible materials, right? And, test them, and AI is obviously going to help with simulation, at 100th this, time in 100th the time. You just think about like the possibilities. Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna have the butlers first.
We're gonna be the butlers.
I think we're gonna have the sex bots first.
That
I know some companies are already trying to do something.
I mean, there were a bunch of articles and videos that got released from how the ones in China look now, and they're pretty fucking insane. So,
it's interesting to that point. I remember for a lot of stuff on the internet, the porn industry was one of the most innovative industries for a while. They're the ones that cracked encoding, and they're the reason YouTube exists. So I was reading the history that apparently some porn website figured out how to upload videos at a good enough quality for it to be, watchable, but without using a crazy amount of bandwidth. And the same concept was used by YouTube to then become what is now YouTube. So what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't looked into the porn industry much, so I have no thoughts on that. But to your point around like robots for sex, I mean, there might be a future if they're human looking enough, and I don't know, like that's a possibility for sure.
I'm pretty sure there's people that want to fuck Elon's iRobot lookalike. I mean, it's a meme right now on the whole internet. So, but to more serious stuff, what's happening with the sex bots in China and Japan and how they got them to look and behave, it's crazy. Now,
People are marrying them, right?
there's a guy that actually married his robot.
I heard about some of that, yeah.
I mean, it's going crazy. But, commercializing technology, it doesn't matter how you do it, right? You do it through a butler or a sex bot or whatever. I mean, hopefully it's not going to chop off his dick, but the faster you bring tech to the market, the better you make it. Doesn't matter how. I'm super pissed off of the Last House coffee machine because it was an older model. And it took me like 10 minutes to figure out how to brew a cup of coffee. Had so many buttons that none of them were doing anything, right? And then you look at this Nespresso coffee machine, has one button, does coffee that's 100 times better than the other one. So that happened because iteration, try all the crap, bring it to market and make it better. And yeah.
Aren't they all being built in China?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons though hardware is becoming easier, right? Because of what China has done with producing stuff.
Getting the cost down?
Yeah, getting the cost down essentially. So there's that. And yeah, to your point, I think the fact that we're trying stuff like Humane and Rabbit, and they're obviously they failed in the sense they didn't have mass adoption. I think that's a good thing at the end of the day, because you learn what works. Look at what Meta is doing now with Orion, right? Google Lens tried it a decade ago, and it was a fascinating concept at the time. Everyone was talking about it, but the product just wasn't there yet. Like it's nice as a demo, but
it's also timing, right? Like what are users ready to adopt? I think smartphones were still pretty new a decade ago when Google Lens came. What was it, 2014?
Yeah, it was like 2014, and what? So the iPhone has been around for like
only
2008. Yeah, so not that much.
iPhone was like still 6 years into the market, right? Smartphone adoption was still like picking up. I think it's probably timing. And now like there's been no innovation in smartphones. They still they've looked the same for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I also think, especially for hardware, there's one amazing new approach that wasn't possible, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. If you look at companies like Tesla, SpaceX, pretty much like even Varda, they are actually designing and building the tools that help them build their products. Like the Gigafactory builds cars, and it's mostly automatic, and those tools were built as an R&D result, right? Tesla with their space factory and the Mechazilla and stuff, everything is brand new, the tools included. So the fact that people now have the capabilities to design their own tools in order to achieve the dreams and what they want to build, I think that's a huge product leap for production.
I don't know if that has to do with capability. I think that has to do with just the operating mindset. So I guess Elon's theory was vertically integrate, and we have a whole class of alumni from those companies, and also ones who watched from the sides, seeing him build and actually become successful. That like this philosophy of vertically integrate wasn't there because it's really cost intensive. But once you get it done, it brings all costs down. Right, so
I think that's his thing, and I wanted to touch on this because apart from vertically integrating, he covers all his bases. Like he covers distribution, he covers production, and he wants to own everything. And I think one of the reasons he will be successful in the future, there's plenty of reasons he's been successful in the past, but I think one of the reasons will be X. And it won't be because of the valuation of X or anything like that. I know there's a lot of trolling around it. But the fact is, at this point, he has a distribution network that he can tap into for free for the next 50 years. So that will supersede, because he says, there was a famous saying, Tesla never does advertising, SpaceX never does advertising. Yeah, they just bought literally one of the largest advertising networks in the world, right? Yeah. So that's going to pay for itself over the course of the next few decades, right? The valuation doesn't even matter. It only matters how many people are on it. So what are your thoughts on distribution? So you're getting hardware is getting cheaper, software is getting, people who don't code can do software. Right? There's so many no code tools. So how important do you think distribution will be, and how will distribution look like in the future?
Distribution is going to be everything. I think joint ventures are going to become more common.
Explain that, like a joint venture between what types of companies?
So people who can think about products and build products, and people who have a following, an engaged following. So the quality of following and the level of engagement will matter a lot. And you'll have a lot of these micro companies, and consumer choice is going to open up. Yeah.
I think a good example, I forgot, I always mispronounce his name, but it's the guy with the Ridge wallet. There's a collaboration between them and a famous influencer. Yeah, we just saw that somewhere, and that was exactly what you said. They tapped into him. And I think other people have done it in the past. I think that's what Tidal did with their streaming service. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's going to be the move moving forward.
That's one, right? Like for consumer hardware, it's different.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon and like Tesla, they'd gone direct from the beginning. That's a different model that you can follow that model still today, whether you own X or Facebook or not, right? Yeah. You can still follow that model. I think that's the best model. Avoid advertisers and advertising as much as you can. Partnerships, joint ventures, I think that's going to be the way. and people who've been building audiences building an audience is going to become like a very core competency for executives at any company.
And how do you feel?
It still is.
Yeah.
It's even going to grow like beyond this now.
Because there's so many, right? So many people from like top VC funds are public personas, right? And they have their own following and everything. But what do you think building an audience will look like in the future? You'll have so much AI, probably 90% of the internet will be bots, right? There's the whole theory about the dead internet. I don't know if you know it. There's a theory that says that most of the internet is bots. And there's basically all the content that you see is not generated by humans. It's generated by either people who have passed away, and that at some point there will be more dead people on the internet, including bots, than actual people. So we'll be kind of walking around in a cemetery reading content written by either things that are not alive or people who are not alive anymore. So it's a whole thing. But that's probably going to become true over the next 10 years, right? So I don't know how you are on the internet, but I realize I'm less and less incentivized to create content, and I'm more incentivized to just automate it because it's easy, right? And just try to figure out where the pockets of interesting content are and consume those to try to stand out. So what do you think that will look like, creating an audience? Will it be just the same as today, just creating content and trying to have interesting angles, or do you think it'll have a twist somehow?
So in the content like pyramid, right? Like there are probably 3 layers. We're probably at the super consumer layer, right? And then there's the middle layer, which is curator, like you curate content, and then there's creator, right? Top 0.1%. We probably work hard enough to find our pockets that are relevant. A lot of people don't even do that. They just absorb whatever, garbage comes their way. Yeah. Like I'm very mindful about unfollowing, muting, anything irrelevant that shows up, and that takes some effort as well. Like, sure, low effort, but that takes effort as well. I try to clean out my Twitter or whatever socials I use, every few months. There's like that pocket. I actually think the value of creating content is going to 100x. It's going to go up. Original content is going to original art, original content is going to become even more valuable than ever. And that skill to think on your own and to create, come on, that is going to be one of the most valuable skills.
I totally agree. I was having a debate with someone a few days ago. They were saying that, most of it's going to be AI, and sure, there'll be some original content, but it'll be the same like we listen to music on vinyls right now, right? So it's going to be 1%, some kind of super elitist thing that you really don't care about. But I think I'm in agreement with you. I think the same way. I guess the question is, because technically creativity is combining things in a new way, right? You're not really inventing something new. So you are inventing something new, but you can't tell people, it's the famous saying, think of a color you haven't seen before. You really can't, right? You're going to think of a combination of colors in a way. But that's technically what AI is doing, is one argument, right? It's combining different things in technically a new way. So you could call it creativity. I don't agree with that.
Is it?
Yeah, no, I don't agree with it, but that's one school of thought, right? So the question is, how do you think you'll approach creating new content in a different way than AI does, right? Because you can tell AI, look at all the podcasts that are out there and try to come up with a new angle on a type of podcast. And it'll sometimes come up with some interesting stuff, right? Not all of it will be great, but you're just a curator in that scenario, right? You look at it and you say, okay, that one's bad, this one is decent, and this one, if you add this to it, it'll be great. Is that what we're going to do to create original content, or it will be a totally atechnical process because you'll just go, in the woods over here and think by yourself because AI can't do that? Maybe it's a kind of a loaded question, but you get the idea.
I have a question for you. But do you think that more AI is actually beneficial for freedom of thought and liberating your creative concept? Because I think that makes people more lazy. I'm just gonna run it through this software and it's gonna make it look pretty and the colors. We were talking to Eitan. Look, I don't like the light here. I'm gonna make it better tomorrow. That's creativity on how you make it. What the AI does is nothing. There's nothing creative. It's dead.
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I totally think it's a bad thing, and that content will become more boring and kind of mediocrity will flourish when it comes to content. But unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen. The question is, how do you tackle that? What do you do differently than anyone else? I don't have an answer for it, so it's an honest question. I'm thinking about it all the time, but I haven't found like, oh, you have to do this in order to stand out in a full AI content world. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I think it's a tough question, but I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts. I think also, again, like you have to zoom out, think in decades, right? We're talking about very few first iterations of whatever we're seeing of predictive AI, right? Which has consumed like the largest content libraries that any software has consumed. And based on that, it's answering a lot of questions, right? And this is going to evolve, right? It evolves when, these AI agents are embodied in cars and robots and are able to absorb net new learning. And then what the next phase is, I think, being labeled as artificial general intelligence, which means they can like learn and maybe think something new. I don't know at what level. There are different levels of AI. And maybe there's like this other stage, which is artificial super intelligence. And I think we talked about this. There are going to be different layers of software. It's all software. It's going to keep evolving. I don't know when we're going to get there, right? Sure. So we can like maybe look at the next 5 years or 10 years. 5 years, 10 years is too far out. I can't predict that. I can barely predict the next 5 years. Right now, AI is an incredible assistant to creativity, right? But to your point, people are like, it's going to make people lazier. I think that's a personal problem, right? So that's where we touched upon training in the last conversation. And I think this is why the necessity and the criticality of training people for advanced technologies in the next 50 years is one of the most important things anyone is going to do.
Somebody needs to tell the Department of Education that, because going back to the discussion we had in SF, what kids are learning at school is, okay, if you go to the humanitarian route and learn about liberal sciences, that's fine. You learn how to paint, write, do whatever, that's fine. But we're less and less prepared to use the tools that we have. And that's valid even for us. I mean, I'm using probably my phone 10% of what it can do. But what I mean by people becoming lazy, if it's easier to generate content, I think more and more people will think they'll be able to generate that content and just create mediocre stuff built by a machine. Which brings me to my next point. I think that you need a soul to create something that speaks to masses. And while, let's say we achieve AGI in 10 years, I don't know, maybe sooner, that's still an artificial soul. Do you see it evolving into something that can mimic and trigger actual human emotions? And I'll give you an example.
As a technology optimist, I hope so, first of all. But then we can like play this out, right? Like, so, okay, let's do this.
I just want to give you an example. Because I'm actually in between. I don't have an answer to the question. It was the leak that Google's AI actually has a soul and a conscience, and some of I didn't follow it because I thought it was dumb at some point, but some of the conversations looked like they were written by a human, but some didn't. So that's an example in context, basically.
So, okay, so we're talking, in this use case, we're talking about content generation, curation online, right? This entire like current system of, timelines, content on the internet, way to reach people is what, 20 years old? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before that, I think history is a great indicator. When people wrote for newspapers, where did they get their inspiration? Was it books?
Oh, it was books. It was real life.
It was real life, lived experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. These last 20 years, people combined other people's lived experiences online. So accessing lived experiences changed, right? You didn't have to be in person to access lived experiences. You could consume a 2-hour podcast and or maybe you consume 5 of it on, different directions on the topic, right? Hear different viewpoints, read something on your own, read a book, right? Maybe, and then go run. This is like top tier, right? Top 1%. The top 1% will always do that. Think about it, do some experiments, see what's true, what's not, get to their version of the fact, and then publish that, right? So that's like journalistic work, right? The top 1% people who will create content will be journalists at heart, right? They will consume and then go verify. But what AI is going to enable is it's going to make it really, really easy, right? Like, for example, just to, complete that thought, if you read like 10 books, you can't, in a year, you don't have the retention ability, to remember every single key part of it. There are usually just 10 key parts to retain anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So you can chat GPT or Perplexity at any time that, hey, like these are the concepts I remember from my notes. Can you remind me what this was about, and then use that to sort of supercharge how you write. But to answer your question, the next 20 years of why are we even worrying about content creation, right? It's going to increase, great, let it increase. Maybe it's going to become more personalized. Maybe it's not even text. Maybe it's like personalized movies, right? Maybe it's even more personal than that. Like we haven't talked about text to video yet.
I mean, that's a super cool concept, personalized movies would be insane.
Or maybe it's like sell me in my way, right? Maybe it's like the product shows up and you're opting. You're like, okay, cool. You have my, in the first 10 seconds, you have my attention. Explain why I need this in my life based on everything you know about me and based on my preferences for consuming this content.
You just gave us a great idea for improving our AI planner and agent, actually.
I think I know what you're going.
Okay.
Cool. So while you were talking about content consumption and the fact that the journalists would be the top 1% creators.
Journalists at heart, they don't have. Obviously,
journalists like a journalist style. Let's call it that. In terms of value, I realize, and I'm curious what you think about this. We're consuming more and more kind of secondhand or even third-hand content, right? So it's more diluted. In the past, you would have a personal experience, maybe write about it, and somebody would read the book, right? Which is, I guess, or would hear about it, which is the closest thing you can have to experiencing it. Like I would tell you personally about it. You can't do that with a lot of people. So then we went into books, then we went into video, etc. So my thing is, the first real experience is getting more and more diluted until it reaches its audience, right? So it's not as emotional, as impactful, because when you're asking AI to summarize something, that goes through a lot of filters until it gets to you. So automatically, it's not. I'm not arguing that it's not a good summary, but it's not as impactful towards you. You're not gonna,
you can probably choose your summary. You can choose like Joe Rogan style versus,
Yeah, but I mean, that's very true.
Pick your
but
style.
It's very different if Joe Rogan would personally tell you something. Yeah. And I think that was the beauty of video.
So that's like, you could choose, tell me like using everything you, and I'm not going to debate how ethically,
Yeah, copying other styles.
No. How ethically, correct it is to, have all of our personal data on file or like how secure it is or what can happen to that data. Like that's a completely different debate, right?
Sure.
On the ethics level, but keep that aside. If your personal AIs, whatever form you're like using them in your phone or like in your laptop, right? They know your entire conversations with your 5 closest friends, including phone conversations, including video conversations at some point.
Yeah.
You can, if you need 5 of your best friends' opinions, instead of asking them, you're probably, here's another reality. You're probably asking the AI to do it for you. And then back to our original conversation.
Yeah.
The importance of this is going to even probably grow.
Yeah.
That's because that's going to be the only thing the AI can do, right?
Yeah, and it's also going to be, I think, more impactful in terms of delivery, you know, because when you're talking to someone and you're trying to get your point across, if it's a one-to-one conversation, you have some human passion in it. You can see the other person's eyes lighting up, and you're like, oh my God. When we were talking about space earlier, right? Like, whoa, we're really passionate about it. We actually see that. Whereas if I read an article or watch a video-generated AI talking about how great space is, it's good content. It might, you know, get the points across, but it's not going to be able to share that type of passion. And I think that's where maybe the difference will be.
I'm just throwing random ideas out there. I don't
me
know if that's
too.
going to happen.
That's the point of a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
I mean, we trashed so much AI in this podcast that when it becomes the overlord, or
We need to take this down.
yeah, it's good AI.
I think it'll take it down by itself.
I don't know. I don't believe in the fact that the Terminator scenario where the AI just kills everybody, and then what's the end goal of that?
Yeah, I don't either.
Fun question. What would you prefer? Zombie apocalypse or Terminator scenario? AI Terminator scenario?
Human scenario?
No, zombie
Neither?
apocalypse. No, between the two. Yeah, sure. Between a zombie apocalypse.
I'm very optimistic guy, in case you haven't realized. So
Damn it.
there's no version of apocalypse in my head.
Okay, so it's like a foundation type of approach,
Yes.
right? Where we all go to. Okay, I love foundation, so that's great. Cool. How are we on time, Ethan? Does it know?
It's 46 minutes. So
Okay.
What time is it?
You're good, I think.
it is 4:30.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Do you want to cover anything else that you feel you haven't covered? Maybe promote the video or something like that. We'll use a clip. We'll edit that in. Talk 2 more minutes about the event that you did, the launch.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. Okay. I'll just ask so you can then go into it naturally. Yeah. So tell us a bit. You had an event a few days ago, right? Tell us a bit about that. I'm curious to know.
So back to how we started, why I'm here, checking out El Segundo, right, hosting my event there. I wrote this long post about space colonization and how in the last 50 years, right, we've seen this surge in software and also computer science graduates and a lot of engineers like doing software, like electrical, mechanical, aerospace. Like they all went into software because those were the highest paying jobs, right? And that's where the, I would say, brightest talent usually flocks. They like find the highest paying professions. So that's happened in the last 50 years. And all of Silicon Valley and modern technology industry that we know today is only 50 years old. The next 50 years are not going to look the same. We're already seeing this pivot to hardware. Because it has more defensibility, because it has a moat, because also you have at least one customer, which is the Department of Defense, right? And that's also what kicked off a lot of modern internet and got it funded, right? That's also what kicked off the entire venture capital industry. If you like go study the history of venture capital, right? And eventually these technologies get commercialized, right? I don't think anyone's been able to predict timing. But people have predicted outcomes. So we're going to see a similar outcome in like colonizing another planet. Like right now, for some, it sounds batshit crazy. For some, it sounds 2 centuries away. But for some of us, it sounds like 40, 50 years away. And that's because we like just underestimate what we can do in like decades, and we're just thinking out 5 years out usually, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what's your view on the whole universe? You know, it's big.
Yeah.
It's full of shit that you can't get to. So nothing in nature is illogical. This, you know, there's that quote, if this is how it works, it's a terrible waste of space.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to crack it and figure out how we can actually see other parts of the universe
100%.
that today seem impossible?
100%. So part of the reason for investing in Figure was in their mission statement, they had help explore the universe, right? So humanoids might be the first aliens we interact with. How? Currently, we're limited by how, like, we're also figuring out like how to put spaceships out there that can get refueled in space and also like take us further into deep space, right? Or even beyond this galaxy eventually. But I think we're probably going to figure this out later, how to send humans that far at that speed. We're going to probably achieve those speeds and be able to send robots out there, right? They might look like dogs or humans or humanoids, could be humanoids, right? We've built this world for the human form factor. So we're probably going to send humanoids out there to figure it out if humans can survive, right? In that form factor. And let's say they're powered by AGI or ASI or whatever you have in like 60 years, 40 years, right? And those are going out, let's say, into the galaxy. Let's say, for, argument's sake, 200 years from now, we might not be around, but it's going to happen. They go out into another galaxy, right? Or even to another star within our galaxy and find another planet, and they live on that planet for a while. And, they come back after, let's say, another 70, 80 years. This is going to run in decades and centuries, by the way. This is not like something that's going to happen like, oh, they went to this other galaxy and came back in 10 years. That's not going to be the case. They come back. They've traveled.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
All good.
Let's go from there. Yeah, this is going to happen.
Yeah. So they've traveled all of space and time and landed on another planet, in another galaxy or in another... probably on another I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but that's fast.
But so imagine that, and they've lived on that planet for a year, right? And they come back. If they're sentient robots, they're not coming back
the same.
Yeah. They have learnings that you cannot even fathom, right? So for universe, yes, I think we're going to explore everything. We're going to moon is not even a question. We're going to be back on the moon. We're going to be back on Mars. We currently have technologies that show us early evidence of even re-engineering humans to digest different sort of substances, to genetic engineering. That's what it is, right? But currently you only get approvals for diseases, not superhuman abilities. 70 years from now, we don't know where that's going to be. Regulatory hurdles are probably going to be the biggest challenges to it. But what is gene editing going to allow us to do in 70, 80 years from now? When all of modern technology history that we know today is 50, 60 years old. Gene editing is 20 years old. The cost of gene editing was $1 million for every sequence or something. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. About 20 years ago, right? And it's now come down to probably hundreds of dollars. Yeah, hundreds of $1,000 or something, right? So we cannot predict what's going to happen in 60 years or 70 years. We might still be alive, but we can't predict.
That's why I want to say. So let's fuck around with the gene editing, because I want to see where we go in space,
100%.
and I want to see how the next planet looks like, and I want to be there for when we actually, because we are not a really sane species.
Yeah.
I want to see the first war that we cause, because we will cause a war at some point. Exactly.
We're not from this planet. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
We've built all the infrastructure around us to help us survive on this planet. I mean, it's oxygen too, which was a great convenience, and water, right? But other than that, we need shelter. We need all these facilities. We need a lot to live comfortably, and that's how our life expectancy has gone up significantly, or at least even just in the last 2 centuries. If you look at it, we've gone from 40 years average lifespan to now it's getting at 70, 80. It's pretty awesome if you think of. Sure, we can complain a lot about GMO, how we get our food, but at least we're not starving.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So to answer that question, yes. But then now the question comes back to why I was in Segundo, why I was doing this, right? We're still limited by the rate of productivity in frontier tech. And I believe the rate limiter to productivity in frontier tech starts from talent. The best talent not going into these industries, the best talent not starting companies in these industries. It's because great talent, we talked about this briefly, I think it's abundant, right? What I mean by that is it can come from anywhere. Right? it from all of middle of America, right? America is really big. It's not just the coasts. It's not just LA and New York. Also all over the world. And America still attracts the best talent. I moved here. You guys moved here, right? And it's because of freedom. The freedom to be able to just go do things.
And kind of the courage of trying new things, which I think the US is great at, right? So they'll throw money.
It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a very American cultural thing. And it's not a widespread mindset or concept, even in middle of America or like most parts of America. So I think the biggest unlock is learning to operate in a completely different way, right? If we can pick the top talent from all these pockets, not just the coasts of the US, in all these different pockets, and put them through a 6-month apprenticeship style program, right? To go work in frontier technologies and increase the number of A teams in frontier tech, that helps us eventually increase the rate of productivity in frontier tech. This is like the baseline of doing what we want to do to get to another planet. So like, I've always been at the early stages. That's what I want to go do next. It's like build the baseline, build the foundation.
Literally
Build that foundation, right? And the way to do it is through a research and training institute. So I'm launching Parsec Institute, which is going to be a research and training institute focused on anything and everything space colonization. And it's not just space tech. It's not just spaceships. It's everything we talked about, from food technology to gene editing to robotics, right? It's everything, to manufacturing. It's everything.
Can I nickname it Space Harvard? In terms of education programs, is it like a space school?
We have a name for it. I'm not ready to disclose it yet,
okay.
but look out for a memo. Once we're ready, I'll share it with you guys.
I'm super curious because there's a lot of naming opportunities in it, you know?
There is. So we're going to introduce a completely new method to be trained in those 6 months. And right now, like this, again, like think about it. In any given company, it's like 10 to 20% of the company doing 80% of the work.
Sure.
Right? Obviously, there are some really amazing companies out there, right? That are talent accelerators themselves, right? But how do we multiply those companies? That is the question. And after a certain scale, 100 employees, that's my hypothesis, 150 employees, that starts dissipating, or 200 employees-ish, right? That starts dissipating. And it's like very hard to keep training A players within the company. I could be wrong, check back in 5 years, but I think A players can be trained externally as entrepreneurs.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Honestly. Cool. Are you good? Yeah. That was great, honestly. Like I think there's a lot of snippets that we can use.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Suffiyan, for this. We started from San Francisco. Now we're here in LA. Hope we'll continue this at another Lumos house next year. Who knows? Maybe we'll sync up again.
I'll probably have more updates then.
Yeah, you should have more updates. That will be closer to like space colonization. I just hope it's not the theme in the free body problem. I don't know if you've read it or if you saw
I think I saw the show.
The show,
right,
So I read the second book after I saw the first show, and they're not that optimistic as you about how the universe works. So I won't spoil it for anyone. I'll tell you later if you want. But yeah, thanks again for this. And looking forward to seeing you both in space, hopefully in our lifetime. Who knows?
I believe it's happening.
Yeah, no, I am too.
And it's the biggest economic opportunity of our time.
100%. I agree. I agree. Cool.
Right.
That's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for having me, guys.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was awesome, man.
This was awesome.
SF was awesome too. I mean, it was fun.